Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to our session this afternoon. And I know it's just before lunch. I think it's rather a late lunch, thank goodness, so hopefully not too many stomach rumbles on the way. My name is Jonathan Betts. I'm co-founder and director for Science Warehouse, and I'm here today to talk to you about what we called intelligent procurement and how data and technology combine to create strategic value in procurement. So my background is actually as a technologist. I worked for 15 years specifically in procurement technology, and during that time I've been really fortunate to work with lots of great organisations and procurement departments and their supply chains. And really our focus today and the content today is very much built from that experience, plus some specific work we've done around market surveys of procurement professionals and the data feeding in from there. So first of all, I want to start talking about the choice that there is in procurement. Procurement has a choice between being tactical and reactive or being strategic and creative. We heard about it in the plenary this morning from Toby Munyard. A lot of the themes that he mentioned in there I think have really come through in my session today as well. So the question coming out of there, and I guess my opinion and hopefully everyone in the rooms, is that clearly procurement can be and should be strategic, creating value for organisations. But what does that actually mean? I suspect it means different things for different organisations. But also want to define that. What are the enablers? How do we actually get there? And we'll talk about three specific enablers, which is the content of the talk, the data, technology. But probably the most important part, which wasn't in the title, is really the people. So in terms of questions and answers, it's probably best we keep those to the end. We've got the stand downstairs, so if anyone wants to see or hear about Science Warehouse and the product, you're very welcome to go down there and meet the team on the stand. They will welcome you there. I'm not specifically going to talk about the product Science Warehouse solution today. So just a quick snapshot on Science Warehouse itself. So the business has been operating for the last 14 years. We're based up in Leeds, and the whole team in terms of our developers and analysts and data people are all housed under one roof. So the customer service essentially all housed within that single operation, and we support our activities globally from there. We provide really user-focused and data-driven e-procurement solutions. I think it's those two pieces which are really important. There's the data, and anyone who knows me knows I talk about data a lot, so it can be rather boring on that subject, but it is key to driving e-procurement success. And the usability, our heritage comes very much from working with end users, whether it's within the purchasing organisation or within the supply base, to provide solutions that are really very easy to adopt. The types of organisations we work with tend to be complex in the sense they have disparate operations, lots of what we might call users in different locations. Similarly, they have a disparate supply base, and quite frequently they also have disaggregated systems and data sets which we're providing a solution to help them address. And ultimately what we're driving to do is to enable organisations to buy the right product the first time and to deliver, I was saying there, hindsight in real time. So there's no need to actually make the wrong choice in terms of purchasing a product. There's no need to look into the rear view mirror at your data. You should have it all in front of you when you're making a purchasing decision. So that's a bit about Science Warehouse. What about procurement generally and where the value is generated? So I think there, as I say, there is a question mark over where procurement is heading in a sense, because cost reduction is clearly the key driver for a procurement organisation, for procurement departments, but there's only so much cost that can be taken out of a business. So with any cost reduction programme, there's an initial burst of savings, and then you quickly get into the area of diminishing returns. So you can look at new categories, keep taking new steps into new areas, but ultimately it's about shaving or fewer and fewer pennies really off the savings that have always been there. And undoubtedly there's a lot of pressure for procurement departments to deliver yet more savings, but that gets harder and harder. So is that heading down to a cul-de-sac? And I think it is. So as I say, I believe there really is a choice for procurement organisations, what we might call between cost and utility models. The first one is clearly the overall aim of procurement is to deliver best value from the spend that an organisation is making. So there's two approaches. So the cost model is what I call here the value preservation. So it's all about being fairly reactive, doing what the business asks you to do, doing it well, fantastically, but it's not really getting outside of the comfort zone, as it were. Whereas the value creation model is much more about pushing out from those boundaries and taking procurement capabilities into different areas of the organisation where they can add a lot of value. A key part of that ultimately is aligning procurement strategy and objectives with those of the organisation. So whether it's a public sector organisation, which is all about getting best value and therefore delivering better services, or a manufacturing organisation where it's all around the quality of the products and the output and ensuring that the elements within the supply chain are delivering value. It really doesn't matter, but the procurement strategy needs to be aligned with those of the organisation. So we did a survey, and I talked about this at eWorld previously, but we work, every year we do an annual survey where we go out to organisations, to procurement professionals, and ask them what are their key challenges, what are the things that they're looking to achieve and deliver in the year ahead. And one of the things that we found over the last couple of years is this fact that becoming strategic is growing in importance. So in the last survey, it was 42% of procurement professionals said that becoming more strategic was a key driver for their organisation. And that, we've seen that increase steadily over the years. Clearly, you can see on the bottom line there that cutting costs is, that is the number one driver, and it always will be. But it's picking up those factors and those trends and seeing that growth in becoming more strategic is there. And as I say, it is a growing desire, if you like, for a more objective for procurement professionals. As I said, though, the pressure is still there from a cost point of view. In our survey for the last financial year, 27% delivered 10% savings or more, but nevertheless, every department, every procurement organisation is being asked to deliver even more savings. So for 3/4 of the organisation survey, they have to deliver up to 10% savings, and a quarter of them was actually more than that 10% figure. So I'm going to come on to now talk about this move towards strategic procurement, what it is, and as I say, the enablers for getting there. So there are three parts. There's the technology, which I'll cover, there's the data, and there's the people as well. And I think it's that latter point which is a really important factor. So we're in now what is the start of the second machine age. So the first machine age was when basically muscle power was replaced by machines, and the high labour jobs, the blue-collar jobs, were replaced, manual works replaced by machines. We're now saying with the second machine age that it's actually decision-making and cognitive abilities which are increasingly being replaced by computers and software. So there is actually a question of whether managers, if you like, are becoming obsolete. There's a lot of evidence, in fact, that decision-making by software is better than the old management gut feel, and that'll be increasingly so. So in terms of, just to talk a little bit about what do we mean by strategic procurement? As I said at the beginning, I think it will mean different things to different people. It will depend on what your objectives as an organisation are and your particular department and team. But there's been quite a bit of work over the last few years to look at this. One piece of work I like particularly is from Samuel Rashid and is this beyond procurement concept. And there are a number of elements which have been highlighted in that work which are interesting in terms of how they, as I say, apply procurement skills, capabilities, know-how throughout the organisation to deliver more than just pure cost saving. So there's elements such as innovation sourcing. So this is working with suppliers to actually pick up on the innovations that they're delivering and incorporate them within your own product development, within your own organisation, for example. There's elements such as total cost-based management, which is really applying what procurement has been applying with its suppliers, but across the whole of the organisation. So it could be a product development process, for example, where there's a requirement for cost management as part of that, and procurement clearly has the skills and capabilities to actually deliver that for the organisation. Extended SRM, I'm sure that people here will be able to talk a lot more than I can about supplier relationship management, but clearly it's another area where that interactivity with suppliers and encompassing them more within the framework of the overall business operation, not just between the supplier and the procurement department, is an area for value creation. And then business services is quite a simple one, but it's probably more around the actual shared services model to a degree. So but maybe extending beyond the traditional PO and transactional processing into other areas as well, because clearly there are skills in managing those elements within a procurement operation. And each of those areas is believed to actually, although they're beneficial in their own right, so it may be about helping the organisation to launch a product and grow revenues, they also deliver around 5% cost impact in each case as well, and delivered in an organisation, so they have that benefit too. But as I say, the key requirement is alignment between what we're doing in procurement and what the organisation as a whole is delivering. So there's very little point in doing the rest of this unless that alignment is really there. And so we actually looked at this in our last survey and to understand where organisations have actually got to in terms of moving through the levels from a tactical operation to a strategic one. And the first one on the list is around just a standard measure of procurement effectiveness, and there we found that 2/3 of organisations measure and manage compliance to procurement decisions. Well, one would hope so. So one wonders actually what the other third are doing, but potentially there are many organisations which don't actually have a professional procurement function, so it may be that they're not actually doing that to any great degree. But when we get onto the real kind of strategic kind of activities, or the activities that support strategic procurement, the numbers that are actually engaged in these activities and managing them are much lower. So if you look at something like supplier performance, where 28% systematically manage suppliers as a key source of value for the business. So the key element there is systematically manage suppliers as a key source of value. So a minority of organisations are doing that. And then the third point, which is the key one around aligning with organisational objectives, again, only 1/3 of organisations are actually working with a well-defined procurement strategy aligned with their business priorities. So there's some way to go, but there are clearly many reasons why these things don't just happen. It's actually hard to do. And this is where I introduce our old friend, the spend monster, who basically eats all our pound notes. There are a number of different reasons why value can be drained from an organisation rather than created. Or maybe I say there are other activities that will be happening within an organisation and within the external environment which actually impact on the operation and don't allow the resource to be devoted to the strategic activity. So there's always the external factors, and clearly in a procurement environment that's very much part of the day-to-day activities, dealing with the external supply base and understanding and working with changes in the economy. So these are massively outside our control. We can only respond to them, but we need to be able to respond to them in the best way we can. There's elements such as the regulatory environment which clearly have an impact on purchasing. That's something which can be managed and driven through, but again, it's something that ultimately is outside our total control. And then organisationally, there are often barriers to proceeding, because there are a lot of factors such as, what I'm saying in terms of systems, legacy systems. So a lot of organisations have either grown by acquisition and therefore have lots of different systems that they're using, or they may be a an organisation which is growing and then their previous system is not fit for purpose anymore. So there's those kind of demands on an organisation to be able to work within often a fragmented environment, which leads, that in itself can lead to fragmentation of data. That's something that we see a lot with many different organisations, that and many very successful organisations, but they really struggle to really pull out their data and assemble it in a way that they can access and interrogate in a meaningful fashion, because it's held in so many, either internally within their organisation or within the supplier systems. It's just not that accessible to them. And the old, I was going to say old chestnut, but the resources and capability, I mean, everyone, we'd all love more resources wherever we are. That's not reality. We always have to work within the constraints that are given to us within our businesses. But so it's all about making the best of those and developing them. And we heard earlier about I think it was the banks that are recruiting all the top procurement talent now, so making it harder for organisations to get the talent they need. But I guess that's a good thing, because everyone's wages are going up. So, and then procurement culture. So that's all around getting a procurement culture embedded across an organisation. So it's not just something that happens within the procurement department, within the shared services centre. It's something that is actually everyone within the organisation understands what procurement is about and what their responsibilities are, and why procurement is doing what it's doing and how it's adding value to the organisation. So the three things I was going to talk about: technology, data and people, starting with technology. This is not specifically about science warehouse technology, and you might say it's a bit generic, but I think these are the sorts of things that every organisation will have on their shopping list when they're looking at adopting a new technology, be it procurement or otherwise. So user friendliness is a key one. It's particularly powerful, I think, in a procurement context with e-procurement, because you have casual users within an organisation who have probably very little interest in procurement per se. They just need to get the products they want, and we want them to buy in a compliant manner. So clearly having something which they can walk up to and use. I know with our solutions, they are generally put live across organisations with zero training for end users, because it is this consumerisation, this B2C-like interface that enable individuals at work to use systems in the same way as using eBay or Amazon and Tesco at home. Integration, clearly, and connectivity are key. So the two things there: one is integration with your systems, but from a supply chain point of view, it's that connectivity with suppliers. So we see with a lot of programs that, in fact, the connectivity isn't really there. It stops at the edge of the organisation, and the suppliers are often left to pick up their end of things. But that connectivity is really a massive driver for ensuring that there's value throughout the supply chain. And the solutions provide visibility and, I think, increasingly collaboration. So arguably any tool allows you to obviously collaborate with suppliers and with your users internally. But as we move forward, there will be more and more elements of software solutions which allow and promote that kind of collaboration. Again, some of it drawing from the consumer-like applications you see out there. Analytics goes without saying. So here it's about drawing the data into, if you like, a centralised environment or certainly an accessible environment. And that the last point around being cloud-based is part of that. So clearly with cloud solutions, that enables you to do that in a very ready manner, if you like. And the argument about, I mean, we offer a cloud solution, so you would say cloud is great, but clearly it has pros and cons. But I think the argument around the economics is definitely being made now. So I saw a slide the other day, a couple of weeks ago, where it showed where the cost of ownership it was a bit like an iceberg. They'd shown, so for traditional on-premise software, the software license costs were 9%, and the bulk of the iceberg was all the support and implementation and consultancy which goes around implementing that solution, whereas for the cloud solutions, it was the iceberg was the other way up. So not quite sure how it floated, but that was the concept. And ultimately, the support is a key aspect. So it's not just around buying a technology platform, a technology solution. There needs to be expertise from providers to ensure that that is delivered. Ultimately, technology in itself is, some of us get excited about it, but really it is about freeing up resource within your organisation to focus on that creation of strategic value. So what about the data piece then? There's been a lot of talk, still is I think, around so-called big data. I've spent a lot of time, we work in the data field trying to find out what is the definition of big data, but that is the definition as far as I can tell. It's data that is big. I think it's not the data itself, so there are increasing amounts of data being generated every time we do a Google search and all the rest of it. There are huge amounts of data being generated. I think the thing about big data is that it's not interrogatable on traditional software, on traditional database approaches, so it does require new techniques to actually generate information from that data, and that's what big data is all about. But it is something that has been somewhat hyped. One of my colleagues back at Science was even more cynical than I am, which is shocking. Said that the sort of hype about big data will reach the peak of inflated expectations this year, or so. Picture of a pie, P-I-E. But in terms of what does big data mean for us in procurement, clearly I think data in itself and being able to interrogate, analyse and generate meaningful data, yes, that's clearly very important. I'm not sure big data per se, in the sense that it's talked about in the press, will have a massive impact on day-to-day procurement activity. I think the changes that will happen will be incremental as well. So over time we will see outcomes from these, but there's not going to be a huge surge of big data value generated. Let me know if you disagree, but that's my view. I was going to do a little quiz. So people like quizzes? I hope so. Look like you're ready for one. So can anyone tell me what the commonality is between these? So we've got a traffic sign. Doesn't really matter what it is, but it's a traffic sign. We have got the game show Jeopardy. So this is an American game show. I don't know if everyone's familiar with it, where the answer is given and then the contestants have to reply with the question. And the final one is the Google driverless car. No? Sorry?
Anticipating the need.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. They're actually all about computers replacing people. So in the road sign one in 2011, there was a machine learning conference in Germany, and basically the participants wrote software to recognise street signs, and they found that 99.5% of signs, and they were in different conditions like blurry and disfigured and things like that, so they were hard to recognise even by humans. 99.5% were recognised by computers, and only 98.4% by humans. So the software was better at recognising street signs than the human beings, which is probably a good thing when you look at the Google car. Jeopardy, similar sort of story. So earlier this year, IBM's Watson computer beat the best two contestants on the planet at Jeopardy. So you can play a sophisticated game like that and win. And then the Google car, it's got no steering wheel, no pedals, goes around at 25 miles an hour, it's got no driver. So there are increasingly aspects of our lives which only a few years ago would have thought, well, a driverless car, that's absolutely impossible. They are being actually done now by computers. So it raises this question of whether we as managers will become obsolete, because software is becoming so much more sophisticated and better at making decisions, and difficult ones at that. Well, I don't think we will become obsolete, hopefully not in my time anyway, but ultimately that's all about staying relevant. So we talked about software will help in decision making, and it may be that we can use software to help us with that and take away some of the gut feel in that decision making that often comes into play. But the future for managers and procurement professionals is about providing that leadership and motivation and all those kinds of people skills and strategic thinking, which will take us as individuals really and our organisations to the next level. So this listing actually came from an article I found on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, so there's nothing particularly surprising in there, but all the kinds of things that we need to do as individuals to stay relevant and stay ahead of the game. So clearly learning, coming to something like eWorld is great for finding out what's happening, doing lots of reading, and generally being aware of what's going on around us. Teaching is a fantastic way, so those of us that mentor our teams and provide input, certainly I find personally you learn a lot more about your subject matter from going through that process and effectively being put on the spot around it. Seeking out new opportunities, so the seek bit, developmental opportunities, so it may be going outside of the procurement department, getting involved in projects which are not necessarily within the normal remit of your activity, but again it's about taking on new things that wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to previously. The thinking piece is really about that, taking a step back and looking at the big picture. So it's thinking about that classic interview question, what will procurement look like in 3 years' time? We should constantly ask ourselves that and have an answer to it. I'll think about mine. And then changing jobs. So it's maybe a bit of a contentious one, but it doesn't have to, could be changing job within your organisation, doing a different role, picking up skills. When we throw ourselves into those new environments, that's when we really learn about what is required of us and the activities that we need to, or the skills that we need to bring on board. So it's not what you know, but how fast you learn. Is that adaptability. It's I'm actually a geneticist by training, so I'll say it's Darwinian. This Darwinian thing is all about evolution, staying ahead of the game. So to finish up my summarise on intelligent procurement, it's all about addressing new and changing demands with new skills, and that will also cover a number of different areas. And we talked about embedding procurement culture within the organisation, and I know that's something that a lot of organisations we work with are doing very effectively, and reaps rich rewards in terms of delivering the procurement across the organisation. The analytical skills, those will increasingly be required. We see even with software to help us, calculators, whatever. The analysis, it is about having number skills, but it's being able to look at data and interpret it and use it in the right way and make the right decision. Excellent market knowledge goes without saying. Again, Toby was saying earlier about actually procurement is in a really powerful position because we're talking to suppliers and they can tell us a lot of what is going on in the market and provide a lot of information, which is possibly the CEO may not even know, but would definitely want to know about, or the CMO, whoever it is. Negotiation ability goes without saying. That's another area where in fact procurement can add value elsewhere within the organisation. So procurement professionals are highly trained in negotiation ability, but how about transferring those skills to your sales team, so they're on the other side of the bench. And I said seeing the big picture, and ultimately about providing, creating a vision for new outcomes, and with the ability and sophistication to actually bring those to fruition. I think ultimately every organisation is actually in danger if it doesn't leverage its procurement capability of missing out. So leveraging procurement is a fundamental source for all organisations of competitive advantage. So that was my presentation. As I say, we are downstairs if you want to come and grab one of us to talk a bit more either the content of the talk or about our technology and solutions. We've actually got, I've got a couple of floating men there, they're not supposed to be there. We've got a caricaturist, I can't say the word, down there, so if anyone wants a caricature take home and give to the kids, please come along and get one for free. And thank you very much. So those are my contact details. I say grab us later if you want to. Thank you.